So Colorado Springs Police Department was saying that because of COVID, you cannot elect a breath test, you have to take this blood test. And then they were directing people to go down to the hospital and give a sample of their blood. Now, some people refused to do that. They refused to give blood. They said that I want a breath test, or they just flat out refused, or they ended up capitulating to the blood test that they were directed to take by the Colorado Springs Police Department. And what our courts here in El Paso County have been deciding, and this is still an ongoing issue, is that is not acceptable under the law in Colorado. So what the Colorado Springs Police Department was doing was saying that the reason that we can do this is because the statute allows for the officer to direct the driver to take a certain type of test if the test elected cannot be completed within 2 hours based on an extraordinary circumstance. And that term is defined in terms of what it is and what it is not in our law. And there's also cases that sort of flesh that out further. And so what Colorado Springs Police Department was doing is saying that, because of this extraordinary circumstance, and they were working with the district attorney's office on this, because of this extraordinary circumstance, we're going to require you to take this blood test. So what the cases say is that the driver has a statutory right to elect the test of their choice. And yes, there are times when there are extraordinary circumstances, but there are other issues that police may believe are extraordinary circumstances, which in fact do not rise to satisfying that definition of an extraordinary circumstance. And here what happened was the Colorado Springs Police Department said on March 30th of 2020, that based on what I would call a cursory review of whether there was an extraordinary circumstance in place, because of that cursory review and because of the case law that we believe allows us to do this, we're not going to allow breath testing. Now, that policy changed a little bit here and there over the course of time, but substantively it was the same policy, which was motorists, you cannot elect a breath test. That remained in place until February 19th of 2021, or around that date, when there was a ruling in El Paso County that policy violated motorists' statutory right to elect, and the district attorney's office sent out a memorandum saying that policy, or law enforcement agencies that have that policy, need to reassess it. Okay, it wasn't based on medical evidence. It wasn't based on medical consultation. It wasn't based on consultation with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment or any kind of public health expert. It was simply based on those factors that we talked about. Now, the other thing that's important to understand is that when this policy was developed, almost a year before it stopped, there wasn't a consultation with medical experts. There wasn't a consultation with public health officials on, can the breath test be employed safely for motorists during the COVID pandemic? It was simply a shutdown of that policy. And so, in my judgment, that is unsatisfactory. And a court ended up agreeing with that sometime 45 days or so after that initial policy went in place, based on some of the things that had happened in society, in terms of the stay-at-home order being lifted, the amount of time that had passed, the safety measures that law enforcement could have put in place to keep both the motorist and the officer safe, that was sufficient amount of time for the Colorado Springs Police Department to have developed an adequate protocol in order to meet this circumstance, the COVID pandemic that was happening. So the court had decided that after that, anything after that is a violation of folks' rights. And so I've had several cases where either evidence has been suppressed or cases have been dismissed outright based on that policy. And it required some determination on my part and other lawyers to get that issue in front of the courts and to adequately litigate it to where a court could make that determination. So we've litigated that issue both at the Department of Revenue as well as the court system. And if you have a case where you were barred from taking a breath test within the COVID timeframe, I'd be happy to talk to you about it and discuss what we know about it and how it can be helpful to you.